Ooh. Isamar, what's up, chica? Jose, that Pink Floyd shirt though.
Brian, how have you been, buddy? How's everybody been?
Good, buddy. I miss you.
I miss you too.
Good to see your beautiful face.
Jose, how you been, buddy? Jose. Miss you guys, yeah.
Hostman, you look jacked, bro.
You're not gonna say hi to me.
Nathan, I was getting around to everybody, okay? I'm starting at the owners and then the masterminds. I'm getting to you.
Damn, I'm salty.
Oh, it is.
All right, I'm listening.
Say I love in camera.
So then what about me, Hosamon?
It's not that, no.
What happened, Kelsey?
You said to the owners first. I said, what about me, Hosamon? You don't miss me?
See, I was getting confused, but Nathan interrupted me.
We miss you.
Right after this call.
We miss you, man.
I'll be back soon.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Don't want to keep you guys too long. These calls will really only be like 30 to maybe 45 minutes tops. Really just the point of these calls is nothing but to give you guys another opportunity to kind of tune in. You know, they're not mandatory by any means. We just want to kind of give you another avenue to grow if you want to grow. I know for me, when I was going through the program, you know, I wanted anything and everything that I could possibly get my hands on to say, hey, how can I grow? How can I get better? How can I take the next step, right? And I didn't, you know, it was different back then. We didn't run a bunch of Zoom calls. We didn't have leaders calls and stuff like that. And so I just always wished I had more content and more stuff to say, hey, look, I can actually be developing. And so that's just what this is. And I know we have leaders calls on Mondays, but just kind of a midweek, hey, look, if you want to hop on, and we'll go over different topics. So it can be anything from, you know, mentality stuff of just leadership mentality. I think some weeks we'll go over some logistical stuff of like, hey, second rounds or something that'll help you more kind of short term. And then other weeks we'll just kind of go over learners mentality and just really developing as leaders. And then just kind of a Q&A at the end of anything that you guys have questions on. So this week, really just wanted to start it off with kind of, you know, we have a lot of new people coming into the business, and you know, we've been talking a lot about retention and stuff in the leaders meetings. And so kind of what's been on my mind is, hey, how can we better equip people, and how can we better, you know, like give people the opportunity to come in and be successful. Okay. And one of the most important things is obviously going to be their first like 7 to 10 days here in the company, on your team. And so that's kind of what I want to go over, is just kind of that before they hit leadership, you know, what are we doing to really retain those individuals, and how can we actually develop them in those first days. So we'll go over a couple things. But we'll go into that, and then at the end we can do a little bit of a Q&A, since it's more of a structured, hey, this is kind of what we're doing in the business right now type of deal, and then we'll kind of go from there. So that's what I want to go into this week. We'll see how well these slides cooperate with me, because I ran a call earlier and they were definitely all over the place. But let's see. I really love this John Maxwell quote, just to point it out before we move on. He talks about, you know, if you start today to do the right things, you're already a success, even if it doesn't show yet. Okay. A big part of leadership is understanding the value of patience. Okay. And understanding that just because you do a couple things right and do it consistently for a little bit, doesn't mean you're going to get results a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road. Like, the biggest thing that you can do as a leader is be consistent with your habits and what you're doing on a daily basis. and just don't look for immediate results. Look for little progression along the way, but understanding that, hey, I'm doing the right thing because I know it's the right thing, and eventually it's going to pay off for me. So just understanding that, it goes a long way just in terms of the example that you're setting for your team and your people. And I know everybody on the call are at different stages, and that's how it'll always be. So whether you have no people on your team yet, or you have 3, 4, 5 individuals on your team, look, it doesn't matter. Don't wait to have a team before you put habits in place that are going to make you successful when you have a team. Okay. Because preparing, when opportunity comes, that's not when you prepare for it. You prepare for opportunity before it comes, and then you take advantage of opportunity when it happens. If you prepare for opportunity once it comes, it's most of the time too late. So just start doing those little things, start putting habits in place that, hey, you're going to have a team, you're confident in yourself and how much, leadership ability that you have. So start putting those things into place, even if you don't have a crew right now. So let's go on to, again, this is delayed. This is what happened earlier, but it'll eventually flip. Maybe. There we go. Okay, cool. So obviously training, we'll cover, that's a different topic for a different day in terms of like the first 4 days of training. We'll definitely cover that. Yes, Hostman, I got you. Sorry, I was missing Kevin and Kate. Cool. Thanks, buddy. All right, cool. Yeah, the first 4 days, we'll go ahead and cover that in a separate meeting. But this is kind of first week out of training. Okay, your first 4 days inside of training, you should be developing that person to get ready for their first week out of training. Okay. And at that point, your first 4 days, again, we'll go over it later, but that should be your time. Hey, after those first 4 days, my thought process is, hey, they're going to be prepared to work with other people. They're going to be prepared to actually maybe solo staff at some point. Okay. And after 2, 3, 4 days, if you don't feel like they're prepared for that, then we need to do something differently those first 4 days. But first week out of training, obviously we want to prepare them to work with other people. Okay. That's just by default going to happen. Okay. Understanding that, hey, they're going to work with different people. That's sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing, right? Sometimes they're going to work with somebody that, hey, they can benefit them. Maybe they're working with another leader. And so preparing them, hey, saying, hey, you're working with a really, really good leader today. They do this, this, and this really well. Just pay attention to how they do that, and really take advantage of you getting to learn from that person. Okay. There's other times when you have to prepare them, to work with somebody that's maybe a little bit of a neg ball. Okay. Maybe somebody that's like not a great leader. They're always complaining about stuff, right? You got to kind of prepare them. Hey, look, this guy is a little bit neggy. Okay. Try to help him. Okay. So prepare them to be a leader in that situation. Try to help them be a little bit more engaged. Try to help them when they say something negative to actually turn that around into a positive and not let it affect your day. Okay. So preparing them to work with other people, obviously can be a really, really good thing. Okay. Next thing is just good habits versus bad habits from people. That goes along right with what I was kind of talking about there. What good habits can they take from other people? What bad habits should they avoid that's not going to make them successful in that first week out of training? Okay. Who to learn from, right? I think we should do a really good job of edifying people that are doing the job really, really well. And if you don't really know what edifying means, it's simply hyping up somebody else because they're doing the job really well. Okay. If somebody's really killing it that week, they're doing all the right things. Hey, point your new person that's fresh out of training. Hey, look, this person is killing it and they're not that far into the business as well. Okay. So two sides kind of there. You want to make sure that they can relate to the person that they're trying to look up to. Okay. Because if you got a level 1 leader fresh out of training, right, and you're like, well, just be like Kelsey. Well, Kelsey's an owner. She's been in the business for a year, whatever it may be. That seems like a long shot for that new person that is just out of a week into the business, a week and a half into the business, right? Giving that somebody that's more relatable, saying, hey, this person is just out of training as well. They're smashing it because of this habit, and this habit, and just follow their lead, and you'll definitely see some success come from that. So understanding, hey, I can point them towards who to learn from. And then from there, obviously you want to do some goal setting to get promoted to leadership, right? This is their start getting out of training. This is their, the gun goes off towards them actually pushing for leadership. So at this point, you don't want to overcomplicate it for them. Just because they're fresh out of training doesn't mean they need to learn 10, 12, 13, like more things to add to their list of things to learn from. Keep it very simple for them. Set a small goal. Hey, this is what we want to do today. By the end of the week, we want to make sure we're in a good position to hit leadership next week, whatever it may be, setting those small goals into place, and the habits that are going to get put into place rather than the sales, right? And I think we've preached this a lot over the last couple of weeks. Hey, what habits can you put in place? Not necessarily focusing on the sales that you're doing, but as simple as like, hey, we're getting 15 quick quotes today. Hey, we're bringing 30 people back to the table and having legit conversations with them, right? Not just hyping up, hey, how many sales am I getting? Obviously, you want them to close people and be good at that. But obviously, the habits are way more important long-term, okay? Because imagine a new start that comes in. They know how, maybe they're just, they can sling it. They can get sales. They just have a mouthpiece. They know how to talk, whatever, okay? And they hit leadership, but all their habits are trash. Okay. As soon as that they lose motivation and they're like, I don't have that direct goal to hit over the next week or two. If they have bad habits, they're not going to be successful long-term. And now that person on your team becomes a lot harder for you to manage because you're having to really pull every little habit and break every little bad habit that they formed over those last 2 weeks. So just setting those small goals in terms of what they're doing on a daily basis. Goal setting about the kind of money that they want to make. Okay. Super, super important that they understand how to make money in our business. There's nothing like being confident in the fact that you can make money in this business. Okay. A lot of people on this call have felt what it was like to get their first $1,000 paycheck. Okay. It kind of clicked for you and you're like, okay, what they're saying is not just all BS. And it's, those people that are getting high paychecks, I know that can be me now. So teaching people how to make money. Okay. Really good use of, hey, using helping them build a habit of using their install tracker. That's the easiest way to get them to understand how to make money in our business. Okay. Because if they can see it stack up, they're sitting on a Wednesday and they understand, hey, I've made $400, $500 this week. Okay. If I want to make that 1,000, I've already seen what it takes to get halfway there. I just got to do a little bit more, and they're just going to watch that stack up. And then at the end of the week, hey, going through that install report with them and saying, hey, this is why this didn't install. Maybe we need to follow up with that customer. That's one of the most important things, because if you have a new start that's like, hey, I smashed it and I made $1,000. That's what it says on my install tracker right here. But they don't understand the cycle of installs. They don't understand that, hey, what I sell on Friday is probably not going until my next paycheck. There's going to be a lot of miscommunication there. And so we've got to make sure that you as a leader are understanding how to explain that to somebody and understanding, hey, we need to go through like a Monday through Wednesday cycle instead of like a Monday through Sunday cycle. And so they're more confident in, hey, I know what I'm doing. I know what my install tracker is about to look like. I know exactly, like almost down to like 50 to $100 what my paycheck is going to be every single Friday. And it just gains a lot more confidence in that new person the faster that you can do that. Okay. So I went through a lot of that with that using install tracker. Okay. Conversion about the first paycheck. Okay. Their first week out of training, that's when they're going to get their first paycheck, right? So everybody knows that they're going to get their training check. Okay. They had classroom Monday and Tuesday. They were off Wednesday, and then they usually work Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? So they don't work a full week that first training week. So their training check is usually going to be between $250 to $300. Okay. So just setting that expectation up front, super, super important that they're not surprised by a lower paycheck than they're expecting on that first Friday, on that first paycheck. Okay. Okay, cool. Daily phone calls. Okay, super simple thing here, but it makes a big difference. I won't talk on it too much, but hey, just following up with that person, right? They're fresh out of training. They were with you that entire week prior, and now they're kind of out on their own, right? They may go into the field and get punched a couple times, and you're not there at the end of the shift to say, hey, look, we still had a good day. You were bringing people back to the table. You closed a few people. They just had to pot. Like, you're not there to have that reinforcement with them. Okay. If they have a great day, right, and you're not there to hype them up either. And so a phone call, a simple 5, 2 to 3 minute, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute phone call at the end of the day can change that person's day around if they have a negative or positive experience in the field that day. So just giving them a call, following up about it. Also, it just helps you know where they're at thought process wise, how you can help them develop the next day. And most of the time that phone call, you know, is just turning their day around if they had a negative experience out of training that first week, right? You can't imagine how much of a difference it makes to receive a phone call from your leader and to get confidence back, and them coming into ATMO that next day completely have forgotten about their negative experience because their leader called them that night and said, hey, look, it's really not that big of a deal. Like, just, you know, take it for what it is. Learn from what you did today. We're going to go into ATMO. We're going to develop some stuff, and we're going to get back after it. It's really not that big of a deal. Okay. So just that little phone call can definitely change around their night, have them coming into ATMO the next day with a positive mindset, with a moving forward mindset, instead of negged out about what happened the day before and never really have talked about it until then. Okay. Using the GroupMe as a tool. Okay. Either hyping up your, you know, most of it is just hyping up that new start. You know, that way they know that, hey, look, I'm doing the right things, blah, blah, blah. I won't touch on that too much. Calling the upline. Okay. This is a really cool thing to use. Definitely recommend, you know, after, especially when you first start training, calling your upline and telling them, hey, you know, I got some feedback from my new guy. This is how it's going. Just so you guys have that communication, because your upline is obviously trying to help you out, trying to help you develop, and they can't do that if the communication isn't there and they don't know how maybe that new start, you know, did that day, or maybe they had an experience. There's just got to be a communication factor there. It helps your upline manage you better, and obviously you want to be managed better. That way you can progress forward that much faster. So just make sure you're calling your upline and communicating there. It doesn't have to be every night. Just like the daily phone calls, doesn't have to be every single day. Okay, whatever you feel like. Some people love them. Okay, some people hate them. But at the end of the day, those daily phone calls, okay, the only reason somebody would think of it in a negative light is if every single phone call that you give to that person is like about production. Hey, did you produce or did you not produce? Okay, start building a relationship with that person. The conversation doesn't always have to be, did you produce or did you not produce, right? It doesn't always have to be about work. So just those daily phone calls, if it's negative, that's probably a sign that, hey, I probably talk a little bit more about production than I should. I want to talk about more about the habits and the mentality going into that. So, and then the last thing, really important on that first week out of training, that they understand that the example of being a student inside of Cardone U or an after Atmo classroom, just the importance of that, right? Because they could easily see it as just like a time killer. I know we've gone over it in leaders meetings and stuff like that. That stuff literally can change people's lives, and it's not going to change everybody's life. That's just unrealistic. Okay. But at the end of the day, we don't want the people that isn't going to change their life to be distracting the people that can actually get something from it. So just understanding the importance of Cardone U and explaining that to them, you know, on a daily basis. So that's kind of first week out of training. Any questions there? I'll kind of pause for a second if we have any questions about first week before I move on to, okay, cool. Before I move on to kind of after training, pushing for leadership. Cool. Awesome. So after training, obviously, you know, they're pushing for leadership. They're either close or not so close, doesn't matter. Okay. Teaching them how to think for themselves. Okay. And this is something that that I've seen so many people do really well, and they're usually the ones that have the biggest teams in the office. Okay. An easy way to get people to think for themselves is to ask questions. Okay. Don't do everything for them. Just simply ask questions. Hey, you know, why do we fill out the install tracker? Why is that important? Hey, you know, why do we talk to every single person that comes into the store? Why is it important that, you know, we don't let anybody walk by? Why is it important that, you know, we pay attention inside of an Atma, right? And the first time you ask a couple questions, they're gonna be like, I don't know. And you're gonna start to see them sit there and think about it. Okay, that's kind of the first step in getting people to think for themselves. Okay, you want people on your team and your crew, the people that you're developing as a leader, to think for themselves, right? You don't want that person that is always dependent on you. They're calling you every 5 seconds. If you're trying to scale a team and you want a team of 20, 30, 40 individuals, and you have all 20 of those individuals calling you every single 5 minutes, okay, that's gonna make your job a lot harder, and it's gonna be a lot harder to develop people. So right up front, you wanna teach people to actually think for themselves. Easiest way to do that is to just ask questions and get them to start thinking about why the stuff that they're doing is important, okay? The second thought behind that is when people understand the importance of what they're doing, it's a lot easier for them to be confident and actually, you know, produce at a high level, or, you know, lead people at a high level, because they understand why they're doing it and they understand the purpose behind it. If you don't understand the purpose behind it, there's really, you know, you're just going through the motions at that point if you don't understand the purpose. So just getting them to think for themselves. Okay, they lose their attitude in the field. Okay, talking about it. Hey, everybody does it. Why do you lose your attitude in the field? Where does it stem from? How can we get better at it? Why do some days you produce and others you don't, right? Having that conversation of, hey, look, I've noticed that like pretty much every other day, like you produce 1 day or 2 days, and then, you know, you kind of lose your attitude and you don't produce for 2 or 3 more days. Like, what's the difference on the days that you produce in the field and the days that you don't? Is anything really different? Is the store traffic different? Is what's different there? And that goes back to, hey, asking questions and getting them to really talk about, you know, what their thought process is. And usually they'll admit, yeah, I just didn't feel it that day. And so I didn't pitch with my 100%, whatever it may be. So just, hey, why do you produce some days and others you don't? Where's the mentality there? Where's the thought process there? You know, because to be a true leader, we're going to have to be consistent on a high level and understand why we do the things that we do. And we've all gone through that. So being able to relate to that person, hey, yeah, like I was kind of the same way when I first started, you know, I was inconsistent with what I was doing. And I really just, you know, I kind of pointed it back to my mentality of like, maybe I struggled with producing early in the week, and I just had a bad mindset towards the beginning of the week. I thought it was slower. I thought, you know, like we just couldn't produce early in the week. And then I realized that every day was the freaking same. And I realized that, you know, I didn't want my success to be dependent on the store. I just had to get better at what I was doing. And so having that conversation with them, that way they can kind of produce that mentality that you want behind it. You know, what is the hardest thing that you struggled with? Okay, hooking people, relating, servicing, closing. The hardest thing, you know, is obviously what they're going to focus on the most, right? And you don't want them to be focused on all the negatives. So just understanding and relating to them and being like, hey, look, I struggled with this too. This is kind of how I got out of it. And maybe pushing them to really not necessarily focus on what they're struggling with, but focus on their strengths and get really good at their strengths. And then obviously developing kind of some of the weaknesses at that point as well. Okay. Really big too as well. You got to kind of judge it, right, depending on where the person's at. But I think for like 90% of individuals, recommendation of personal growth, right? Kind of pointing them towards maybe a book or a podcast or bringing it up in some sort of fashion. One of the biggest things in our business is just, hey, understanding that I'm on a leadership scale right now, and I'm going to have to grow a little bit to be where I want to be. And so you want to kind of instill that in your new person early on. You know, that way they can get better that much faster. So simple thing, but like thoughts on when we run like opportunity meetings or there's leaders meetings, or not necessarily leaders meetings, obviously they're not a leader yet, but There's, we run different impacts or workshops or whatever it may be, just getting feedback on that stuff from them. Hey, what did you think of Kelsey running an opportunity meeting this morning? I know when I first heard that, I was a little confused with everything that went on and how our business actually ran. Like, what did you actually think of that? Like, anything stick out to you or anything like that? And just getting thoughts on what their feedback is and getting them engaged with what's actually going on. It'll help them develop. And then following up on other impacts, Monday impacts, I kind of went into that already. Why do this is kind of when they're pushing for leadership, why do they enjoy the business? Where do they see the business taking them? That's a little bit deep of a question sometimes. So you got to kind of judge it with where you're at with the person. Do you have a good enough relationship with that person? But yeah, where do they see it taking them, right? It doesn't have to be like a super in-depth, like, do you see yourself being a owner and a regional consultant and a national consultant and making 6 figures and blah, blah, blah. It's just a simple, hey, where do you see this business taking? And then let them talk about whatever they want to talk about. And you can kind of judge the conversation from there. And then huge one here. And I could talk about this one for days. But motivation versus mindset. Okay, motivation is temporary. Mindset is what will take you and help you succeed long-term. Okay, so you don't necessarily want to hype up your individual. We love the motivation. We love the recognition, everything like that. But your job as a leader is to create mindset and create habits that will actually make them successful long-term, right? Because kind of like I talked about earlier, you don't want that person that's dependent on you all the time. And when we see people that are just motivation focused, man, it's every other day, every other week that you got to hype that person up. Every day that they walk into the office, you got to hype them up and get them excited, or else you just know they're not going to produce. And those aren't the people that you want, to be managing on your team. So motivation versus mindset, training on, hey, what are my thought processes? How am I thinking? I don't need somebody to sit there and hype me up all day for me to actually go out and be successful and actually produce. Okay. That kind of follows that. Just being a student, really great examples. And there's a lot of people on this call and in our office that are great examples, but Corey, Olivia, Gunnar, you guys are just great examples of being students, always being on calls, listening to calls, being a good example. And the last thing for this one is when pushing towards leadership is just stress the importance of being a student. Okay. Same thing that I kind of followed up on the last slide, but just super, super important that they're a student of the business. They're a student of actually growing. They're a student of trying to master, if it's the sales skills or whatever it may be, right? That person is going to be such a better leader if they can just learn to be a student, right? Those people that come in, everybody's probably had it if you've hired a couple people, where you have that person that comes in, they just think they know how to do the job. They think they know everything. And you're like, man, yeah, your confidence is great, but man, when everybody's talking and they've given you such good information, man, you're just waiting to respond. You're not actually listening to what's going on. You're not actually being a student. And if you would just listen there's a difference between listening to respond and actually listening. Okay. Listening to respond. And I was literally right before this call listening to a Gary Vee podcast. He talked about this exact thing about, hey, when you're actually listening, you're not just listening to give a response. You're listening to soak it in, to learn from it. And there's those people that just listen to give a response, and you're not really listening. You're just focused on what you can provide to the conversation. And it's not a bad thing to provide to the conversation, but at the end of the day, are you actually listening to what's going on? Are you learning from what's going on? So just stress the importance of being a student. You as a leader, obviously got to set the example there first of being a student, but then obviously stressing the importance of being a student will go a long way with that person actually being successful in our business. Okay, cool. Any questions there before I move on to kind of the last slide? Okay, I'll go through this and then we'll go Q&A after. Cool, obviously promotion to leadership. Okay. We have the leaders checklist inside of our office, that we should be, that Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right? Whatever works best for you. I know Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe you're off and they're scheduled or whatever it may be. So whatever that first day is after, you guys are both in the office together, actually sitting down, going through that leadership checklist with them, getting with Kayla up front on getting a picture and all that good stuff for social media. And then from there, just kind of explaining the responsibility of being a leader, right? Explaining what do they kind of see, think about the management training program, right? They should understand it a little bit better by then. And just kind of seeing where they're at. Hey, you just hit a level 1. Do you kind of know what that means for you? Do you know that means you get a pay raise? Do you know that means, hey, you get to start shadowing some second round interviews and actually, maybe hiring somebody on here in a week or two and actually getting to teach and train? Like, are you ready for that? Like, does that scare you? Where does that put you on kind of the scale of what are your thought processes behind the management training program, right? And just kind of you as a leader can gauge where you need to go with that person based off of some of those responses of like, hey, yeah, man, I'm scared to death to do a second round interview. And that's completely okay. 100%. There are tons of people that are scared to death to do a second round interview. I was terrified when I did my first second round interview. That's nothing against yeah, Jose's laughing right now. And I know he was terrified too. And that's completely okay. That new person, you as leader need to make them understand, hey, look, wherever you're at, that's okay. But I want to help you get to where you want to be and taking that next step. So obviously goals for the next promotion, right? Just kind of understanding, hey, this is, your first goal after this is obviously to be consistent with production. That's just part of being a leader. And you can't preach what you don't practice. So goals for the next, just wanting to get one leader on their team, kind of understanding what that looks like, right? Their install tracker, understanding that, hey, just because all those little habits, we've done for a week or two now, those don't just go out the door. We need to make sure we're really on point with those and explaining why. Okay. This is probably the most important part, because a lot of people, where people make the mistake is, hey, just do your install tracker. Just do it. It doesn't matter. Like it's just part of the program, right? That for me, if I would have heard that coming into the program, I would have been like, dude, you're just telling me to do it. Like I have no understanding of why I should be doing an install tracker. Okay. And so explaining, hey, look, it helps you to actually track your pay. It helps you. So when you get a leader on your team that, hey, you want them to build habits that are productive for them. And so you've got to set the example first before you can ever ask somebody else to actually set the example. So understanding the importance behind things is almost way more important than actually, saying it to them, right? I would almost rather people not, tell somebody to do something if they're not going to explain the reason behind it, because that person at that point is just getting a laundry list of things to do and they're just doing it as a job, right? And it's just because they've been told to do it. And that's not the people that we want. We want people that think for themselves, people that understand the reason they're doing it with a purpose, and they can actually, do their job with a purpose and with passion and understanding the things that they're doing and the reason behind it. So, install tracker, talking about money that they want to make, right? The next one is kind of talking about money they want to make, going through a break even. I know the break evens, we used to send out as a part of the install tracker, and now we combine the install tracker. So a lot of you don't have access to a break even, which we can get to you guys. But a break even is basically, it's simply an Excel sheet, and you can put in your personal finances. Okay, what you pay for rent, what you pay for your car payment, if you have student loans, whatever it may be. And simply at the top, it's just going to say, what you need to bring in every single week for you to actually break even and actually support what you got going on personally. And then obviously whatever goals you have outside of that, if you want to invest, if you want to just save extra money, whatever it may be, you can put that in there. That way you can actually start reaching some of your personal financial goals, which is super, super important, right? Financial literacy is not really taught for us growing up. And so if there's one thing that hopefully, we understand that not everybody's going to be in this business long term, but if they can take from that is just the habits, maybe some financial literacy, understanding how to make money and manage money is definitely a big one. So going through that break even with them, if you think that's going to be beneficial for them, have a conversation about saving money. Okay. Hold on one sec. Okay, cool. Have a conversation with them about saving money. It's hilarious to see how many people complain about not making money, And then when they start making $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 paychecks, they still complain about being broke. Okay. I never saw it more than when I was in Dallas. But you'd have people making $1,500 a week and they complain that they're broke. And they make $2,000 a week, they complain that they're broke. I'm like, buddy, it's not the amount of money that you're making. It's simply the fact that you don't know how to save money. The more money that you make, the more money that you spend. If that's the case, then at the end of the day, you're going to end up with the same amount of money in your bank account. Maybe just a nicer pair of shoes or a nicer car that you have a payment on, whatever it may be. So just have a conversation. Doesn't need to be a super complex conversation about, what do you want to make a year, or what kind of house do you want to buy in 10 years, whatever it may be. Just a simple, hey, let's just try to start saving money. You can tell them your goal. Maybe you have a goal for the amount of money that you want saved up before you get promoted to ownership. I know for me, it was like $15K that I wanted to have saved up personally before I actually got promoted to ownership. I know if you look at Alan in Dallas right now, what was the number? Hosamon, Olivia, can you guys help me out? How much do you have saved before you got promoted?
17.
It was like 17.
18,000? Okay. And if any of you guys know, he's not in the business anymore, but Kayshawn, a really good friend of mine who lives in Colorado Springs now, he had over 30K personally saved up from being a rep before he actually got, he was promoted to mastermind, and then eventually got a coaching position. But insane just mentality of like, hey, if we're trying to run a business at some point, right, what you do with the small things is what you'll do with the big things. And so just having that small conversation, that's a whole topic that I could go on forever. If you want to talk about finances with me, I would love to sit down and talk to you about it. We'll go on for hours. But obviously, every single slide, and this is just how important it is, but being the biggest students now, as a leader, you're looked up to. You're going to be the first one that people point out if they're doing the wrong things, right? And sometimes we're like, man, that sucks. I don't want the responsibility of, if I screw up, then I'm always pointed at like I'm not doing the best job. Okay, that's just part of being a leader. Okay, and if you want to be at a high level of success, you want more people pointing towards you. Okay, and if anybody could tell you, it's going to be me, because I hate when people recognize me or like point towards me or anything like that. Okay, so, but I understand that to be on a level that I want to be at, okay, you're going to have to influence a certain amount of people, or else you're not going to be at that level of success that you want to be. So understanding that, hey, I want to be one of the biggest students. That way I'm actually setting the example for my leader, but talking to them about the importance of that, and that how more people are going to start looking up to them. And that's a good thing, but we do have to set the example and be a good example there. And then that kind of finishes out the last point, explain why they need to be good examples, right? How is it going to help them progress if they are good examples? Okay, we're not just here to be good examples to be good examples. We're here that, it helps you progress. It helps you develop leadership skills. That way you can actually see the results that you want to see from it. Okay, not just because somebody told you to do it. So that's kind of it. I don't want to go too long. I know it's about 45 minutes now, but a lot of stuff, a lot of, really just, hey, that first week, 2 weeks out of training, hey, how can we set a good example for them? And how can we explain why it's important for them to set a good example as well? Not just because we want them to, not just because we want to grow the office, but because they want to, and they want to actually, grow and see results from what they're doing. And so kind of preaching that and making them understand the why behind what they're doing, and not just to do it. So again, we'll go into a little bit of Q&A. If you guys want to hop off, you're welcome to hop off. But any questions, let's go ahead and fire them off. If we got none, then great.
Just got a question. So how do you usually go about, you see how you talk about good habit and bad habit, right? And you kind of said that, like to point out the good habit that, your new start needs to pick up. But then again, you don't really want to say anything bad about the person they're going to work with. But how do you point out the bad habit that they need to avoid for? Like,
yeah, That's a good question. I'm just kind of honest with them. It's not me pointing out anything bad about me saying, hey, you know, sometimes this person has a negative attitude, or sometimes, you know, they go half their shift and then they'll kind of stray off and not work the second half of their shift. Just, you know, for me as a person, it's not really like demoting or saying anything bad about the person. I just want to help my leader develop. And I want to help them have the right expectations going into the store. So I don't really view it as, hey, talking bad about I'm not sitting there bashing the person. This is the worst person you'll ever work with. Like, they suck. Their attitude is terrible, blah, blah, blah. I'm just, hey, look, this is kind of what I've seen from working with them, or feedback. And so if that happens, then just try to step up as a leader and really try to help them out, right? Don't just like avoid them or push them off to the side, but actually try to help them out. And that's just going to help my new guy actually be a better leader. And it's going to help them say, hey, look, just because I'm new doesn't mean that, you know, I have to have the same habits of this person that's maybe been here a little bit longer than I have. So I just don't view it as really talking negatively. I'm literally going to say one little thing about, hey, maybe sometimes they're a little bit negative. Just don't take that into account. You know how to do your job well. Try to, if that happens, try to step up as a leader and really impact them. And you know, they're simply that way because, you know, they haven't seen success of a positive attitude. So really try to show them that in the field. And I think if you do that, I think it'll really help them out. And they'll have a focus of like, hey, I'm trying to help this person out, which is obviously helping them develop as a leader. And it's going to probably help the other person out that is being a neg ball as well, because they're able to actually, you know, be in the field and they're already aware of what's going on. And so they can actually help that person if they are being negative.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, good question though. It's definitely a tough one.
Ryan, I got one for you.
Sí, señorita.
When you talk about the training more mindset than motivation, when do you think is a good time to have these mindset mentalities, one-on-one talks or in leaders meetings? Or
yeah, that's I feel like personally that pretty much every conversation that you have should be mentality based versus motivation based. Now I'm going to hype up a guy when he does something really well. And that's kind of when I think a lot of people gear towards trying to motivate when people aren't doing well and people aren't maybe doing the right things to actually be successful, whether it's inside the field or inside the office. I think those are the most important times to train on mentality and, hey, what habits are we putting into place? And so I think almost all of my conversations with leaders is more mentality focused than really motivation, because I know that's what's going to make them successful long term, right? And why would I ever want somebody to be successful for the next week and then just fall off, right? So I think most of those conversations, I don't think a lot of what people look for is like that black and white answer of like, hey, Mondays you sit down and talk about this, Tuesdays you sit and talk about this, Thursdays is this conversation. And there is a structure to it, 100%. I think Isaiah in Dallas does it really well. I think I have a video of it somewhere if anybody wants it, how he structures conversations throughout the week. For me, it's more of an instinctive thing. And I think that's what it should be for most people, of like, hey, when does maybe my person need motivation, maybe went through a legit hard time, or when is it they're just, they're being kind of soft. And maybe there's some habits that I can put into place that'll actually help them get out of that, instead of just hyping them up for one day. They're really good for that day, and then the next day their problem isn't solved because they haven't changed anything. And so I think most of it, probably 90% of it, is geared towards mentality. And then you have to make that instinctive, like, hey, when is motivation, when is it needed? And most of the time for that, it's when they're already doing well and already doing the right things. Because where people focus on is too much on the negatives. If you can push the positives and what they're doing really well, and that's all they focus on, they're going to continue to build good habits. They're going to continue to do they'll master a couple things that they're doing really well, and then they'll be good at that, and then they'll try to find other things that they're really good at, and they'll just keep moving forward instead of harping on everything that they're doing wrong and stuff like that. And I know that's two separate subjects, but I think for kind of answer your question, Olivia, it's just most of the time it's focused on mentality and like thought process and why we're doing what we're doing. And then sometimes you got to be instinctive with, hey, when is motivation needed? When is hyping up a new person needed? So hopefully that answers your question a little bit. Mr. Derek, you're chilling, buddy. I like it.
I got one last one though.
Oh, big chillin'. Big chillin'.
So when it comes to goal setting for like a new leader, which topic usually comes in the growth?
Hold on, you cut out a little bit, buddy. Repeat that.
Like when it comes to goal setting for a brand new leader, right? Which one do you kind of like focus more on, like the sales and the consistency, or more like the interview and the business and the growth?
When they first get promoted, or are they not at leadership yet?
No, they just got promoted, like a brand new leader.
Yeah. So I'm going to focus on consistency, especially that first week out of training. I'll bring up second round interviews here and there that we're going to start, maybe shadowing one at the end of the week, whatever it may be. But really, like, just because they hit leadership, right, where you see a lot of the fall off is that they haven't yet mastered that kind of keeping the positive attitude in the field. They haven't mastered how to close somebody. They haven't mastered those little things that make most people on this call really successful. And so I really want to keep the focus there while kind of towards the end of that first week saying, hey, look, we're probably going to start doing some of this. That way I'm not taking too much focus off of them still mastering kind of the sales process and how to close people and how to keep a good attitude for 5 hours inside of the field, right? Those very simple things. Because where you see the fall off is, they're new to this thing and they got by with it, maybe with simply a positive attitude and some hype about trying to get to a certain amount of apps or whatever. But they really didn't, master all the disciplines that it takes to be successful consistently. And so I really want to shy away from like Tuesday, I'm like, okay, we need to sit down and master second rounds. We need to go over it 3, 4, 5 times. That way Wednesday you can do one. And hopefully by next Monday, you're going to have a new start. And then that person's just like, what in the world just happened? Like I barely learned how to sell. Like now I have to teach people. And it just becomes this overwhelming factor of like, man, that's just way too much going on. And then you see them struggle in the field and they're not used to doing second rounds. And then they struggle in that area. Right. So it's kind of going back to what I said earlier. It's kind of an instinctive thing about where that person's at developmental wise, but I'm always going to err on the side of pushing it back a little bit because I know how hard it can be to master, actually pitching every single person and closing some people and keeping a good attitude the entire time. Okay. Because I mean, even as the best leaders in the business, sometimes you lose your attitude. Okay. Some of us are better than others, but at the end of the day, we're all human. And so I want them to master those little things before I kind of give them another big responsibility, right? Because that's some of us, in this business, we're like, yeah, it's second rounds. Like, it's not that big of a deal. Okay. But imagine you going into your first, second round, you like having the thought of doing an interview. Like, what? You're usually on the other side of the table. Now I'm on this side of the table, actually maybe helping somebody get a job when I just got a job like 4 weeks ago, right? So a lot of responsibility there. I would just err on the side of slower development than just rushing into it and not letting them develop. And because when you do that, you don't let them develop in either area, and then they're bad at both things or they're mediocre at both things. So really hard for them to focus. I'd always err on the side of pushing it back a little bit and having them develop versus the excitement of maybe getting 1 second round that they're not really even developed with anyway.
Ryan, I have one question.
Yeah.
So how would you like handle a new start? I know we have like the first, second, third, and fourth expectations. and let's say after that first day that person's done good, but every time that person comes back the next day, it's just like they forget about everything we did before. Because I know you can't really like literally tell a new start, hey, you suck, but how would you like handle that?
Yeah, probably not a good idea to tell them they suck. I have to take responsibility for that as a leader and be like, hey, maybe the stuff that I trained on was a little bit too complicated. Okay. And I think, who was it? Cade. Me and Cade went through this last week a little bit, right? We had a guy, he just, wouldn't catch on to anything. And literally, you got to take responsibility for that and go as simplistic as it can to where they can actually handle it. Okay. Because you're not going to be able to change, like 30 minutes of atmosphere is not going to make that person automatically a genius and just get the pitch, that you're trying to ingrain in them. Right. You're going to have to adjust to them and make it very, very simplistic. Right. And I think I do this with pretty much any new start, no matter how smart or how quickly they get onto things. I do the 4-step pitch, and I'm going to make them repeat that over and over and over and over and over and over again until they get annoyed with me. And then I'm going to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And I just know that the person may not understand why they're doing it, and that's okay. But that's just part of being a leader, and part of, if you look at any coach around the country, most of their athletes, a lot of them are smart enough to know why they're doing what they're doing. But that coach, they're a coach for a reason, because they have kind of the outside perspective that they understand how to put things in place that's going to make the entire team successful, right? And they're always going to have those individuals that come up to them and say, hey, why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? Well, that single athlete doesn't have the perspective of the coach. Okay. Same thing when you're training somebody, right? They don't have the perspective. And so they may seem like, hey, why is this person making me, we have 30 minutes and they made me repeat it 30 times. Like, why did they do that? Okay. They won't understand it right then, but when they look back, they'll understand it. So when you have somebody that doesn't catch on, you have to go as simplistic as can be. And I would honestly say to start off with that, I think it helps people develop quicker. But if you notice somebody, hey, they're not catching on as quickly as I want them to be, okay, you got to understand that they're never going to change just because you want them to change, right? You're going to have to adjust to them and have to understand how to train them better. And usually it's just going back to the very bare minimum, bare bones, like, this is the pitch, let's do it 100 times. And then once you get that, we'll kind of move on to the next little thing. Because let's be honest, we've all overcomplicated some things, but everybody in this could literally take a 4-step pitch into the field with a good attitude and actually pitch every single person. And I guarantee you'll get sales. Like, you don't have to know all the product knowledge. You don't have to know all this, that, and stuff. Have a good attitude, know a very simplistic pitch, and you'll close some individuals. Maybe not all of them, but you'll close some people. And so just knowing that for your new start and just making it very, very simple, but understanding that, hey, I'm never going to change them. I've got to change as a leader to actually help them get from where they are to where they want to be, not necessarily where I want to be, where I want them to be.
I got one for you, buddy. So when it comes, so the one thing that I'm not so much worried about, but I noticed this when Olivia was training me, that when she was like, how she was describing it to me, like, I don't want to come across as, part of my French, but a dick, like if I'm going to be training somebody, and when I do train somebody, like, I'm kind of nervous as to how I approach it to start off, because I don't want to come across like, so like, boom, 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 you got to do this, 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 and this, and this. Like obviously, like, the first couple of times is going to be like trial and error, trying to do the best I can. But what would you say would be the easiest thing, like, structure wise, to start with, like, with a new start? Like, would you start with the basics, like obviously the basics and getting the pitch down, and then from there, would you go with product knowledge, and then or like mentality? Like, where would you go next?
For sure. We'll go over kind of first 4 days of training, which will really help you. I love this question though. because I think a lot of people are scared to ask it, because a lot of people have that concern of like, hey, how do I like not be super bossy and just like have a list of things that I want them to do and blah, 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 right? It just comes from your mindset and your perspective, right? Like Derek, why, what is the goal of you, what's your mindset behind, why you would tell somebody to do something?
I mean, just because what I want to do is just help them. Like my job is to help them succeed and to help them get to a point where I was in my first week of training.
For sure.
So,
I love it. That's the exact answer I was looking for, because if you have that mentality and that's just your thought process going into it, I don't think you ever really come off like a jerk or like you're being bossy or whatever it may be. I think if you truly have a care for that person and you're not just telling them because it's part of the job or it's what they're supposed to do or whatever, you truly believe, hey, this is going to help you, make you more successful. And it truly comes from a place of like, I care about this individual and I want them to succeed. I think when it comes from that, I think it's very hard for somebody to see you as just being a jerk and just telling them what to do, unless they're just not receptive. And that's few and far in between. You do have those people, but at the end of the day, like, that, you're doing it for a caring purpose. You're doing it to help them make them successful. I think if you do it from that mentality, you'll never have any issues.
cool. Thank you.
For sure. Love that question. Cool, guys. Any last thing? Maybe one more. And if anybody has one, but other than that, it's been right at an hour. So I don't want to keep you guys too long. Sweet, guys. Awesome. Well, we will see most of you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hopping on. I appreciate it. Love to see all of you guys. We will see you mañana or whenever we see you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Ryan.
Adios, everybody.
Bye,
Peace out,
guys.
everyone.
Bye.
Great call, guys.
I love you.
Oh, you're so
Love you
sweet.
too, buddy.
Bye.
Aww.